Shevii of Parshas Devarim ends with two psukim that address, perhaps one could say, the central concern on a practical level of entering the land of Canaan. There are three concerns that Devarim is very concerned with. Two of them are on the religio, social level, or perhaps simply on the religious level. The one is that they'll come into Eretz Canaan and be attracted to the gods of Canaan, to the way Canaanites lived their life, and they will lose the message of the one God and the message of the Torah, and they will go and serve false idols of various kinds. One concern. Another concern is not the worship of the idols, the Canaanite idols, but the worship of, perhaps we could call it the idol of the modern age, the worship of self. The worship of self is indicated as well in Devarim, and the Torah speaks about it. Moshe Rabbeinu warns them about it, that you'll come in and you'll find everything is good, and in the end, rather than saying that all of this is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that all of this is bestowed upon us by God, you will say, Kochi v'yotzim yadi yasuli et hachayil hazeh. It's my power, the strength of my hand, right? I did this, and it's the worship of self. But you will forget God. Those concerns are not being spoken of. Those two concerns are not being spoken of at the end of Parshas Devarim, of the end of the first parsha of Devarim. The Torah says, "V'es Yoshua tzivesi b'eit hahi lemar." I commanded, Moshe Rabbeinu says, I commanded Yoshua at that time, Einecha haro'ot et kol asher asa Hashem Elokeichem, your eyes, you are going to lead the people into Eretz Yisrael, into Eretz Canaan. You saw et kol asher asa Hashem Elokeichem l'shnei amlachim ha'ela. You have seen how God protected us, what God did to these two great kings of Ever Hayarden, of Sichon, Melech Hamori, of Sichon, and Og. Kain Ya'aseh Hashem lochem l'chol hamamlachot asher ata over sham. So too will God do for all the kingdoms, for all the powers in the other side of the Yarden, in Eretz Canaan. Now, what does it mean he commanded Yoshua? And why is he telling Yoshua? We know Yoshua is going to take the people in. But Yoshua is the one who will lead them with this certainty. After all, in the story of the Meraglim, Yoshua is the one, along with Kalev, who says, no, it's not true. The doubts are not real doubts, right? Yoshua is the one who says, Sart Silam, their protection, they have no capacity to defeat us. Ki lachmeinu heim, they are as bread to us. In other words, you're not afraid to eat bread, you just consume it. We will consume them like bread. And of course, it's Yoshua who is poetically playing, and this is why Moshe is emphasizing this. Yoshua is the man who understands that the milchama we call war, and we say war is frightening, and it is, but with HaKadosh Baruch Hu on our side and fighting milchamot Hashem, fighting the wars of God, then the enemy is lachmenu, the word for bread, lamed chet mem, which as a noun is lechem, is bread. As a verb, lochein is to go into battle. It's the word milchama, the battle. And with that, you have nothing to fear, because you have a leader who understands that, and he will guide you in that spirit. Nonetheless, Moshe emphasizes at the end, Lo tira'um, do not be afraid of the nations of Canaan. Ki Hashem Elokeichem hu ha-nilcham lochem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the one who will conduct battle for you. And of course, that this is exactly what Moshe tried to tell them at the time of the Meraglim, that Re'ei natan Hashem lokech lefanecha ta'aretz, right? Kasher alei reish kasher diber Hashem lokech lecha al teiravi al techat. Do not be afraid. Do not be dismayed. This is in the first parak of Devarim, where he's recounting the events of the Meraglim. And nonetheless, vatikrivun elai kulchem. All of you said, you came unto me and you said, no, we're not going to be able to do it. Okay? And you rebelled against God. V'omar aleichem, then Moshe Rabbeinu says again, Lo tartsun v'lo tiraun mehem. Hashem Elokeichem oleich lifneichem. Don't be afraid. And nonetheless, it may not be enough to tell people not to be afraid. Just as it is not enough to tell people to be afraid. In other words, on either side, the question is, how do you command emotion? In other words, the problem of telling somebody that they have to have Yirat Hashem and Avat Hashem is a problem, a philosophical problem. How do you come to it? This is addressed by Chazal. It's addressed by the Rambam beautifully in Mishnah Torah and in the Guide. How can you command an emotion? How can you command an emotion? And of course, what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying here to the people at this point in time is that you should understand something. You have sufficient evidence that there's nothing to be afraid of. After all, what happened with Sichon, and what you've seen it, what happened with Og, that evidence should be sufficient for you to understand that the reason you're going to be able to conquer, and the reason that there's nothing to fear, is because you are fighting, as it were, with God leading you. With God leading you. And that certainty which you have experienced should be enough to move, if you will, all the, whatever fear or awe you have should be directed to God, but not vis-a-vis the enemy, not vis-a-vis the Canaanites. And this, of course, is what Dovid HaMelech says, Gam ki elech b'geitz ha'movet, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I am in difficulty in life. I don't fear, ki ato imadi, you are with me, and you are with me, and you are the play imadi. The poetic play is you are with me, and you allow me to stand up. Hamod, you stand me up. You have your protection cast over me. Fros aleinu sukkah shlomecha. Spread upon us the sukkah of your peace. And one can be at peace in that sense, even at war. It would be instructive here to see the Rambam in the Guide for the Perplexed at the end, when he talks about how evil will not befall the person who is focused absolutely on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so, this plays itself out in a halacha, in which is the Torah will tell us which will appear later in Sefer Devarim, and that halacha is the halacha of people who are exempt from war, and they're in Perek Chaf of Shoftim. One of the type of people who are exempt from war is the person who is mi ha'ish hayarev v'rach halevav, a person who is experiencing fear and is weak of heart. He goes back. He does not fight the battle because he might cause others to despair. And the Rambam in Perek Zayin of Hilchos Malachim and Milchamot, Perek Zayin Halacha Tedvav, the Rambam explains this: Mi ha'ish hayarei v'rach halevav, who is a person who's afraid and weak of heart? Kimashma'o, it's pshat, according to the pshat. She'ein b'libo koach la'amod b'kishrei hamilchama. He doesn't have the capacity to stand in the fray of the battle. In the fray of the battle. Rambam is emphasizing kimashma'o because, of course, there is a drasha, that the drasha is that it means a person who is an aveira, who has aveira, who's done aveirot. He's yarei v'rach b'leivav because of the aveirot that he's done. Rambam is saying the simple pshat here is the halach issue. There is I once heard a play that had been written by some maskil, not an anti-religious. It was put on in Warsaw, and it was a play about Jews going out to war. And let's say there are hundreds of people on the stage, and they're all standing there with their whatever they used for guns, maybe broomsticks or whatever the actors would use to stage in Warsaw. And they show how a Jewish war, it was a mockery play, a mocking play. Jewish war is somebody who's just gotten married, so 10 people leave. Somebody who's just built a new house, somebody planted a new vineyard, and they leave. And in the end, there are 170 people on the stage. So you don't have 200, you have 170 going out to war. And then the announcement is made, Mi hayarei v'rach halevav. And people say, what does that mean? What does it mean to be afraid? What are the conditions of that? I know what planting a vineyard, I know what getting married is. What is the conditions? And they say there's a halachic argument about what yarei v'rach halevav. And one of the opinions in Chazal is that even a person who spoke between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach, spoke during Psukei de Zimra, right? Hayare, right? He has Aveiros biyado, but what's the Aveira? He's not like the hugest Aveira in the world, but like he talked in shul. So of the 170, 168 left, and the only two people left are the Vilna Gaon and the Shagazarya. When the way I heard it, when Reb Chaim Brisker was told about this play, he says, of course it's mockery, but the joke is really on the playwright, because if the Vilna Gaon and the Shagazarya were the only two people marching out to war, the Jewish nation would come out victorious. So the Rambam is explaining, right? When a person enters in battle, he should depend upon Mikveh Yisrael, the hope of Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Umoshio B'eit Tzara, and the one who saves the people in a time of distress. The Yeda, and the person who's going into battle should know, Shal Yichud Hashem Hu Oseh Milchama, for the principle of monotheism is he going to war. V'yasim nasho b'kapo v'lo yira v'lo yichad, and he should not be afraid and he won't be in terror. In other words, it's the focus on the certainty. Lo ira ro ki ato imode. One has to have that focus of absolute that if something is absolutely true and it's the lodestar of your life and what guides you in life and everything, and there is nothing more certain than that, and if HaKadosh Baruch Hu has promised that he is fighting with you, then that's 100%. So that's the idea. The idea is the certainty that I am fighting a war that is just. I am fighting a battle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is fighting really with me or for me. And that is what that kind of certainty, that kind of faith, as difficult as it sounds, is the faith of war, as the faith of living in a country at peace, should be the faith that I am here because this is my way of life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would have me live. As the faith is certain that it's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and that it's not kochi v'yotzim yodi. And in that sense, the certainty of the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this issue, which is called entering and conquering and living and staying in the land of Eretz Yisrael, will have success. V'chein yihi ratzon.